Welcome again, everyone, to today's webinar. We are talking about the features in ARM that we can utilize for reviewing multiple trials at the same time. The idea here, a somewhat common occurrence that at least this time of year you may be experiencing if you've contracted out or even internally have a bunch of trials that are wrapping up as it is nearing the end of the season here, at least in the northern hemisphere. Pretty common scenario then, a bunch of trials all coming in at one time. Very high pressure, high stress time, perhaps with lots to do. And so we tried to just kind of compile a few of the functions in ARM that can help automate this process. What can we do if we can save ourselves even a little bit of time in every trial? Since we have so many trials that we're tackling, we can gain a lot collectively, since we're having to do this process again and again as trials keep coming in as fast as possible, as it maybe sometimes feels. So I've got three main features that we'll be tackling today. We're going to use the study list up front. That'll be our first one we tackle. Then we'll talk about trial validation, and then we'll go into the assessment editor and use some of our view options to see how we can look over the assessment columns, look over the data that was recorded, and at least organize and quickly process and review what is there in the files. Okay, so our first topic here is to use the study list. So just to introduce this function, it is kind of the very first tool that comes up if you open up the ARM software without opening a trial. It's the opening window there. What this is simply a list. It's an indexed list of the ARM trials and protocols that you have opened on your computer. So each time that you open a file, ARM just indexes a bunch of the information that's in that trial into a really big table that we can then utilize to search and filter and find those studies later on. Kind of a key part of this that's sometimes can be confusing is that it is just a list. It's just this temporary view of certain studies. So the files themselves aren't stored in the software. They are stored either on your hard drive or like your network location, maybe OneDrive folder, things like that. Your files are always stored and remain right where they are. And we're simply in ARM with the study list, just getting a view of the files wherever they may be. And so we have some flexibility in changing this list. There's nothing if that list suddenly is emptied out because we want to start brand new, that's not a problem. We're not removing any data. The trials, the protocols will always be right where they're saved. And it's just what do we want to look at in our list that can change. So that's kind of the key. Don't know why that picture was hiding. So that's the key setup for our study list. It's just a tool for us to look at a certain set of files. We're not putting anything in danger if we clear out this list or change things at all. And we'll jump into ARM in just one moment, but just real quick to give a snapshot of what this will look like. So our study list, like I said, that's kind of the first thing you see opening up ARM. Lots of things on it. It's a very ARM type of editor, so many things to look at, can be maybe a little overwhelming. So trying to break up what we see on the screen into the different sections. So the main one that at least my eyes go to first when I look is the study grid. This is the big table with the list of all of the protocols and trials and all of those different indexed pieces of information that's contained in those files, just in a really, really big table. Right to the right of that, there is a panel that gives you a little more visual way to see the information in the particular study that you've clicked on in the grid. So when you select an item in the grid, that same information that's in that table is displayed just a little closer to like what you would see when you open the trial. To make it easier to review, since it's hard for the human eye to have to scroll across a huge table and understand what we're looking at. So that's the panel there. Then the big section on the top in the middle are a set of filters. And that'll be kind of the big function that we're going to utilize with the study list, being able to use all that information we know about each study and filter and find what we're looking for. On the right, there's some quick filters. So this will give us an idea of what filters are currently applied. And there's some also some additional filtering functionality that's over there. And last but not least, is just a little navigation bar that helps us go through the different sections of filters. So kind of similar to a miniature ARM trial where you've got that navigation bar to switch between editors, but this is switching just in between the different sections of our filters. All right, so with that, I'll hop over to the real ARM here. And just to correlate once again, those different sections. Before I show them, I guess I do want to point out, I do have this box at the bottom called tutorial checked. So typically when you first come into ARM, this is not checked. And and the list is showing your studies you've worked on. We do install a number of trials and protocols with every ARM installation that are just to play around with, just to demonstrate functionality, help you in tutorials and in learning ARM, things like that. And so by turning on this option, the list toggles over to the tutorial list, all of these tutorial files. Works really great in my case here as well, because now I can go through all these steps and you actually have this very same list on your computer. So if you wanted to follow along, you open up your ARM beside mine and follow the same steps, we could see basically the same thing because you have this very same list of trials and protocols on your computer. You just have to turn on this tutorial option first. So with that, let's look again here at the components. I've got this main table, and these are the different trials and protocols that I have on my computer, specifically the tutorial ones. And I scrolled real quick before, but you can just see as I slowly move to the right that there are just a lot of columns, and you'll recognize them as different sections of information from different sections of the trials. So, there were a bunch of contact information. Now we got some completion dates and the crop details and the pest details. So just from all different sections of the trial, we're bringing that information, indexing that in a list for us to look at. And as I click on each one of these files, this selected study preview changes. And again, that's just trying to make it a little more visual if we, it's almost like opening up the trial and looking at it, but trying to just capture everything in a real small area to give us an overview of what we're looking at. So that way I don't actually have to open up the trial and then close it and come back and repeat. It's easier to kind of scan some of the details using that pane. I won't do that a whole lot today, so I probably will drag this over a little smaller so we have the most screen space here. Then up above are the filters. So this allows us to shrink down our list into, to allow us to find the trials or protocols that we're looking for. So, let's just use a real basic example. Maybe the very first thing I would want to do is just filter by trial year to only look at the ones from this year. Not sure if you can see it or if it's a weird display problem just through my Zoom. There should be checkboxes next to each of these items in this list, and then I would click on the box to select certain items. For me, I don't see a box. I'm not sure if that's just because I'm presenting. If you can't see it, then I guess we'll both have to use our imagination a little bit. Seems to only happen when I'm presenting, so don't know why that is. But what we have, as I clicked on this gold filter box, we have a list of all of the different values of this particular field of the trial year for all of the studies that are in my list. And so by selecting the 2024 and clicking OK, this creates a filter. So now we can see at the top here, I only have 10 out of the total 64 studies that I were looking at in my list. And you can see this list is a whole lot shorter. We only have 10 of them now because we only are looking at those that have a trial year of 2024. So this allows us to narrow down this list into only what we want to look at. So trial years is a nice simple one to use. Some other ones that would fit in our example today of really just looking at a set of studies that we might have. Study type, that would allow us to only filter for trials. Or conversely, if maybe we're getting ready to send out protocols for the next year, and maybe I want to review all the protocols we have to make sure they are complete before we send them out. I think that'd be another example that a lot of today's functions would certainly work for as well. We could filter by study type, or probably a little more trial specific again would be the trial status. And that would be on the general tab of the site description. We've got the trial status. One more thing to point out, this list now is pretty short in the trial status because the items here only reflect what is in the table. And since we're already filtered out to only see 10 trials, this list only reflects the unique trial status content in these 10 trials, not all 64. So, we are kind of digging further and further, and so you can really narrow in your focus just as you add progressive filters. So maybe I only want those that are marked as final. And that brings us down to 3. So that's the general filtering capability in the study list. There's some additional filters over here that are just really fast and easy. Toggling to only trials or only protocols, when was it modified, things like that. And then I do also have a summary of what filters are currently active. So if I'm not sure, why don't I see a study, or why don't I only see 3? I know I've worked on a bunch of files. You can see there, oh wait, we're filtering by trial year and status. If I want to remove those filters, I can either remove them one by one. So if I didn't want to filter on trial status, but I still want the 2024, I could come in here and just delete out that filter in the box. And then I'll kind of unwind the filter. Or if I want to start totally fresh, I don't need any filter at all. There's a remove filter button at the bottom. That'll get us right back to our full list of studies. There was a question real quick on the status. So this is, using the trial status field in a trial. The one downside here is certainly you have to be kind of maybe a little familiar with the codes. So F is short for final. I would be interim. And to be honest, these other ones offhand, I'm not sure, but I'll just open up a trial and we can go to that field. So if I just go into the general trial and open up our status, you'll notice that, in the trial itself, we're saving that code, that one letter, but certainly if we look at the list, we can see what each one means. So there E is established. So that happens just right when the trial is created, it's set as established. I was right about the I as an interim. F was final. K is for the multi-year final, reviewed and reported and archived. So that's what those codes mean. Not a great way, I guess, to see that right on the study list, but certainly if you use that field maybe more and more, you might kind of get accustomed to those. All right. So that's a real basic introduction to the study list and what it can offer. A quick sidebar advertisement, another reason to use this that we hear commonly. You might be not so much in this reviewing multiple trials, but you might get a question of, hey, what research have we done on such and such crop with such and such product, et cetera, et cetera. There's always this question that has multiple different components, being more specific on a certain combination. And maybe you just need to know how many trials you've done. Maybe you kind of would like to look at some of the results to get a sense of how things did, whatever. That can be kind of a pain to have to really jog your memory and go ask the person that's been around the longest so they can kind of remember. Well, no, actually the study list is perfect for something like that because you can just take that question apart piece by piece and create a filter for every one of those components. Just real quick, treatment name, you can just grab the project you care about. What have we done with Accord? Well, I just click on Accord and say, okay, that'll zoom down the trials to anything that had the Accord treatment in it. And then you could slide down to the crop and narrow down what crops you've worked with. Obviously, I'm running out because I've only got the 2 trials, but that's just another good use for your study list. Is finding things across all of the trials you've worked on. Okay, so back to kind of today's goal with reviewing multiple trials. Certainly, if you have been working on those trials, they will be in your study list. But perhaps you're just receiving them for the first time. You don't really necessarily want to have to open each one of them up just to get them into your study list to look at them. So there is a rebuild button, and this will allow us to tell ARM where to go look to find more studies to bring into this list. Now, before you press that, if you were following along and you have the tutorial list on, I'll need you to turn that tutorial off before you press rebuild. Because with the tutorial list, ARM doesn't need to know anything about where to find the files because we have a specific folder where all of these files are. So the rebuild just automatically runs and we have to sit and wait for it to run. So you would turn off your tutorial list and then do a rebuild. And then you get this dialog here that allows us to pick a path where our files are at. You can search all the subfolders. And then you can either start with a totally empty study list, or you can keep your existing list and just add whatever else we find. So today's example, not much I can add to our tutorial list. It is what it is, but that's a good way to just have ARM go browse out to that network location where everyone's been adding files, and you can just find all of the rest of them that we care about. And then they'll all be indexed here in the list. So a couple other things we can utilize with the study list in our effort to get an idea about what is in all of these files. I might go ahead and just toggle a filter for just trials. And certainly I could focus down the trial year or something. We'll just keep it lengthy so we have a bunch of examples. But we could use this table as a nice consistency check to see if some of the most important pieces of information are filled in even in our studies without having to open every one of them and looking at each one individually. One trick to do so, actually, when you're using the filters, if you click into a field, then the grid automatically scrolls to find that field. So you'll notice I've got parent protocol to the right here. As soon as I click into discipline, this table slid over so that way discipline was the column that's visible for me. So just a way to navigate if we wanted to, make sure our GPS coordinates are filled in. Well, I can click here to the latitude, and now I can scroll through my list to see how many didn't fill in GPS coordinates. And you can tell we're kind of a mess here in our tutorial list. they're not super reliable. These look pretty full. Maybe we'll cheat and use these because hopefully your list looks closer to this with more things filled in than a bunch of empties. That would be not as ideal. So hopefully it's closer to full, but it allows you to see when there's something that's missing. Oh, for some reason, this one trial didn't fill in, well, the planned completion. So that might be my fault as a sponsor, but hey, the trialist has marked it as complete, so that's good, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a good way either just by scrolling through the table to see what holes are missing, or you can use, kind of navigate through with the filter box to see, okay, now let's just look at crop. Okay, everything, we've got the planting date. A couple of them didn't fill in the stage majority. You can real quickly review a bunch of trials at a time. And actually you can pull up and kind of change the size of these panels too. So especially in this case, I might really want to limit how much space the filters take up because I really would like to see, a dozen trials at a time if I can help it or whatever. There was a question on this list about bringing in a few trials, if there's any limitation to how many trials. There really isn't a limit as far as how many trials your study list can hold. Certainly, if you have thousands and thousands, maybe the software might be a little slow trying to filter through all that, but there really is no practical limit. And actually, I would recommend, I'm going to cheat and use tools options because I think I have these same options here for when you're rebuilding. What I would do in this case that might be the simplest is to browse out to your OneDrive or your network drive or wherever where all those files are at, and pick your 2024 folder, the folder for this year. And you might have a bunch of subfolders, by each company that you're working with, things like that. Just choose the highest level folder where everything you want to look at is stored. We'll just pretend in this path here that ARM trials, and then it's 2024. ARM can then look, as long as you have subfolders, it can look in each folder within the 2024 folder to find all of your files. Then if you do the clear existing list, then you'll only have in your list the files that you're working on right now. Like we said before, it doesn't mean it's getting rid of any of your other data, but it's just using this tool to focus just on this year's, just on whatever it is I want to focus on. And that's a great way to prep this list. So you're only looking at the things you want to review. And next week, you can come back here and rebuild your list to whatever else you'd want to look at, whether you've received a bunch more trials, or maybe we're on to the next phase. And I want to kind of find what we've done historically in order to prepare for next year's protocols. Well, I can come in here and rebuild and remove the 2024 and have ARM load in all of our studies from all of the years. Or maybe it's time to just look at the 2025. So kind of the one big takeaway, hopefully, is that this list is super temporary and you can make it into whatever you want. And it just takes ARM, a minute or two, kind of depends on how many studies you have for it to rebuild. But it just opens each one up in memory real quick to fill in the table, and then it moves to the next one. So it only takes a couple minutes to rebuild if you're working on a reasonable number of files at least. So yeah, that's really step one is get that list focused on what we care about. Then we can do either some filtering farther down or utilizing this table for that consistency check to see what we're missing. Another way to do that, certainly we can scroll and that would work fine. One other trick, we do have a clipboard button that will basically take this whole table that we're looking at, filters or no filters. Right now I'm filtering down to 45. So just these 45 trials that I see on my screen, I can copy this whole table, all the information onto my clipboard, so that way I could use that table somewhere else. So if I click on copy all, I could go into Excel and I'll just do a blank notebook. And then all I have to do is paste. And everything we saw on that study list is available here to me now. I'll resize so we can kind of see. We've got the heading of everything, and then all of that information about all of my trials is available here in Excel. So in our case, we can review the information here. One trick, you can highlight all of the blanks, so that might make it easier for things to pop out or even just organize. So I'm gonna, if I click on this corner box right above the 1 and to the left of A, that highlights the whole table. That highlights everything that I have in this spreadsheet. And then under the Data tab, oh, excuse me, on the Home tab under the Data section, I'm looking for, conditional formatting. I guess it's not called data anymore. Conditional formatting, I can make a rule. And the rule specifically here is that I can format cells that contain blanks. And then I can choose whatever I might want to do. So maybe I want to fill it in yellow, so it stands out to me, or maybe yellow's a little harsh. We'll do orange. And that just goes through that table, and any cell that is empty, it fills in with that color. So maybe that makes it even easier to review as I'm going through to see what in my files that I'm looking at, what ones are empty. And I probably should have turned the freeze panes on the top row, so I can actually, oops, do that when I'm actually at the top. But anyway, that's just a way to maybe utilize what you kind of know, some tricks in Excel. You can get that information all there. Okay, so study list, a real great way to avoid opening each trial one by one. That's kind of the thought is, I'm receiving a dozen at a time. I don't have time to sit and poke through one at a time to try to know what I've got. So this could be a kind of a first step of just scanning through things using the study list. Our second option is to use validation. This is kind of a fairly common topic for us in our webinars, so I won't try to get too deep on it today. But the idea is to automate the process of a human sitting, looking at the screen, clicking through every section of a trial to look for what should be filled in. Instead, let's have the software do that. It can do that in milliseconds compared to a human that's going to take minutes to get that job done. So ARM has a function called validation. It's under the tools menu, where it will programmatically run through the trial and find out what is wrong, what needs to get fixed. And so ARM refreshes any entry fields, any calculations, things like that. It can do cross checks. So if you have filled in a temperature value, but you forgot to put in the unit, or conversely, you have a wind speed unit, but there wasn't a number filled in, things like that, ARM can pop up and say, wait, if you've chosen a unit, surely there should be a number here. So this is a missing piece of information. Then it can verify any rules, any requirements that are in that particular trial. And so there may be some rules kind of built into the study definition, just the way the trial is made. So if you're working with a company that has the customization, they have the rules just baked right into ARM. Or there's also user-defined rules specific just to this one trial. And that is the study rules function in ARM. So that's the way, ARM itself, somewhat limited in what it can check because it doesn't know your research. It doesn't know that you need to have the wind speed at the time of application because that's super important to understand, what problems you could have had with a treatment. ARM doesn't know that because some other type of research that might be totally irrelevant. So study rules is the way to really have ARM learn what matters in a particular trial. Bring in your business rules, bring in your requirements of this type of research into the trial itself. And then ARM can include that in its automation. ARM can then check all of the things that you care about on your behalf, so you don't have to click through the screen and manually look at it. So again, we're not going to spend a lot of time kind of showing how to create these rules. We've got some webinars and tutorial videos on our website that dive into that entire process. But we'll do it real quick here in ARM, the process. So obviously, in this case, we do need to go into a trial. So we would kind of now inspect one specific trial that we need to investigate. Like I said, instead of having to go through every tab of the trial and use our own eyes to decide what's missing, what do I need to have the trialist do, or what do I need to fill in? Let's automate that process using tools validate trial. And you can see ARM is reading the study. And in this case, it made it all the way through and nothing was wrong. Everything was done almost perfectly. There's one little thing that comes in as a warning. So it's not something that is the most critical. So in general, the trial is valid. We've passed all of the rules that are requirements, but there's just one little thing we might need to look at. And it looks like ARM can't detect that we used crop 1 at all, either in the crop stage or the assessment data. So that might be something to look at, but overall, we did great. This is an older trial. I don't think I have any study rules, so that's why we passed. There was a very low bar. We didn't have very many requirements that we had to have. Maybe I'll just let's create a problem. I'll just delete out the GPS coordinates and then create a study rule to say we do want these to be filled in. So just real briefly, then we can go ahead and run that validation to show what happens if there's an issue. And ARM, as it starts to scan, finds real quickly, wait a minute, there's something that is important that's not filled in. And it tells us it's the latitude, that's because of study rule number 2. And then ARM takes us right to that location of the piece of information that's missing. So then I could fill it in. And then I would just proceed with validating again. And it's going to do the same thing and then stop the next time it finds a problem. So kind of automating the process of finding what's wrong. If I'm not the person to fix these issues, maybe I am just receiving this trial and I need to communicate back to the trialist these information that is missing, I can validate the trial but log all of the errors. And then this goes through the entire process and just puts them all in a list. And so then this is handy. I can click on a clipboard button and then I can just, reply back to my trial list with the list of problems. So if I paste, use my keyboard, I'll do the screen paste here, that list comes right in here. So then I can tell the trial list, please, can you send me an update? There's these pieces of information that are missing. Question, can you set the rules on the back end once the trials have been completed? So part of the implementation of the study rule. And when I was clicking on this to add the rule, there was a lot of these options here. And so when you create the rule, you can control when the rule should kick in. And it's related to this trial status field. So in my case, since it was GPS coordinates, as soon as the trial is established, the trialist should know those coordinates. So I put it as when the trial status is set to established, this should get filled in. But maybe something like the harvest details, that clearly can't happen until the trial is pretty much over. So I would maybe want to set that to be when the trial is set to final. So it's still a requirement, but if we are in the middle of the season, so the trial status would be interim, if I'm still just working on this trial, then when I validate, and I'll just log the errors so we can see everything, you'll notice there is not anything about the crop, that harvest date, because the time isn't here yet. So you can certainly put in the rules from the very beginning. That's like the optimal, because then you could have the trialist actually run validation so they can see the list even before you do. But if not, you can add the rules and run that validation and see. But the rule itself can have a time aspect to it. So you can control when should this, in the flow of the season, when does this piece of information actually matter? And that's common for things like assessment data. If you want to require a rating date, I need to know the date whenever the rating was taken, then the condition there is that it's only required once data is entered, because then we know that assessment took place. So by doing that, you can fill in all of your descriptions for assessments and not have just a whole bunch of errors right away. It'll only start to trigger once you put data in there. So currently we don't really have a way to run the validation on multiple trials at once. I think the one exception maybe is if you have a database, you can try, when you export a trial to your ATD database, then ARM performs validation before it sends it to the database. So in that scenario, you could choose a bunch of trials to send to the database, and a side effect of that would be validation gets run on each one of those. So a little bit of a hack. There isn't just an explicit, let's batch validate a bunch of trials. Great questions. One more here. When we are looking at multiple studies, can we see what type of analysis each trial used? So I guess some of that would be if they sent you a report, there's some indications in like the footnotes of like an ARM AOV report as to what method was run. In general, a lot of those statistical parameters aren't saved in the trial. That's really on the individual user's level as to what their report settings are when they run the analysis. So that type of information isn't saved in the trial. So you can't quite look up what the other person had done, again, unless they send you the report itself. Then there's some indications, at the bottom of an AOV report. There's footnotes to say your alpha level, the test, like things like that. It is common. Hopefully maybe they, if it's like, what does the sponsor want me to do or something like that, there are spots in the trial to just make note of what you'd like to have done. So like in the protocol instructions, there's a field for statistical analysis. So, the sponsor could put in, please run this and that, and have just instructions communicated that way. That is an option, but it isn't something saved in the trial itself. Okay, great questions. Really quick, when you create these study rules, you can then save the list so that way you can use them again and again. And so we call that a set. And that's really the best practice would be, kind of open up a trial, kind of go through all the requirements, things you would want, create rules in that one trial. Then save that list of rules so that list can be used again and again in all of the similar trials. And that just puts those into a file that you can load again and again. And so although you can't do like a batch of trials automatically, it can be fairly quick once you have that report set created. Let's actually just walk through that real quick. Save my set. This is, my trial review. It's a rule set just saved on my computer. And then now I can close this trial and open the next one in the list. And I'll just go down this list of ST examples, open it up. I can go right to my study rules. I don't have any here, but all I need to do is load that set. And so load my trial review. That list I just saw is now in this trial. Tools, validate, log errors. What problems do I have? Hey, there's one. Either I can go fix it or hit the clipboard and send it back to the trial list. Hey, I need this fixed too. And then, and then in this trial, I'll paste in this trial. This was what exam 2 trial. I need this information, and then just repeat. And again, it really, oops, click on the right buttons. It can go pretty quick. And then just open the next one, load the set, et cetera, et cetera. All right, I've got one more topic we'll try to squeeze in here, but definitely check out, like I said, we've got some previous webinars we've done that will cover the rules in more depth. Our last topic, one more functionality we can do to look at what is contained in a trial would be specific to the assessment section. Our assessment column view has some functionality that I think in general can go kind of hidden, that people maybe don't know is there. I think this is a good trial. This fungicide one just has a bunch of different types of assessment columns that'll give us a good example. So moving to the assessment data section, that's one of the bigger components that we're looking at is all of the data that was recorded, all of the ratings that we took. And this one is a reasonable size. There's only 13. I think that's probably not realistic. Lots of studies have a lot more than that. And so just trying to wade through what's been recorded, how do I make sense of all of this? Do I know that everything that I needed to have taken was taken? Things like that can just be hard with this long list. So we can take advantage of our view options. There's a shortcut here, otherwise tools options. There is an assessment data view. And what we have in this top half is a column filter. So we can adjust what columns we see on the screen. We could sort them differently. We could filter to only see columns that have certain information. So if I wanted to filter by rating type, so I only wanted to see the pest severity trials, for example. Same thing, I'm just using that filter button, clicking OK. Now we're going to filter the view of what we're looking at to only see trials that have pest severity as the rating type. And if I click OK, now my screen has changed and I only see columns 3 through 8. And it just happened that they were all together. We could have a whole different conglomeration of study of columns in a different order even too. A shortcut actually is using this visible column button. This gives us this exact same tool, just in a pop-up instead of having to go back and forth. So I can just delete that to remove the match. What I find really helpful is using the sort. Let's maybe sort by rating type. So that way all of the common types of assessments are put together. And then maybe within that, I want to sort by date. I can do multiple layers by just putting another number in. So I put the number 1 in, so the first sort layer should be rating type, and then the second layer would be date. And if I press apply, now my columns are arranged alphabetically by rating type, and then with columns that have multiple of, the same type, then they're sorted by date. I can also use display sort as tabs. And this will take whatever is the number 1 sort and create kind of like an Excel spreadsheet tab for each of those. So this is a great way to simplify what you're looking at. So I only see the selected one. And then all of the columns that match that. In this case, rating type, I could choose any field I want to sort by. Maybe I would want by crop instead, or pest instead, or whatever. But this is a real nice way to just categorize, be able to look across the columns and make sense of it a bit by however your brain wants to organize it, as opposed to, I think probably most commonly it's chronologically entered, or however the trialist happened to enter in the columns. Now you can control how they're arranged, and I especially like that display sort as tabs too. To organize. And maybe just to demonstrate, we don't have to use rating type every time. If I wanted to do the pest maybe instead, now I have all the assessments related to one type of pest, and then the second one here. And this would be a good example where that second layer sorting would be helpful. Now, everything within this one pest, how do I want to arrange these? Maybe it makes sense at this point to sort the second layer as my rating type. So common assessments are next to each other. And then the third layer could be rating date. So that way all of my pest severity are next to each other by date for this one pest. So a lot of flexibility, because you can choose the field on how it sorts. So depending on which, depending on the type of study you're looking at, you might have different parameters that matter and some that don't. You can also hide certain fields. That would be back on the main view options here. The visible column, again, there should be little checkboxes to decide yes or no whether that row is visible. So you can, of course, hide some things that you maybe don't care about or don't need to look at right now. a shortcut for that I like to use. You can also double click on the heading over here at the left. So if I don't want to see the collection basis, I can double click on it and that makes it hidden. So I can simplify my view a little bit. We've got these nice sections as well, so you can shrink down some of the information. So that might be a little easier to view, so I can fit more details all together. I still know what crop and what pest, but I don't have all of those rows, so a little easier to see what I'm looking at. If you like this function, you kind of have this maybe the same set of little filters or organization that you do with every file. You can make a view file from that. So in your view options, you can save the view, and that's going to save everything up here. You know, everything you've chosen to be visible or hidden, everything you've chosen to sort or not, things like that, saved into a view. So that way you simply have to, you can load your view then through this list. So I've done this before, my data review view. If I just click on that, it immediately applies what I had set before. So it'd save you a little time repeating that process for every trial that you do. Just go to the assessment, click on your view, and then you can look over your study and then just move on to the next trial. Okay, so that's kind of the last example, last function that hopefully is useful for looking over and reviewing a bunch of trials. And we are out of time. Thanks for your questions. And if you do have any others, want to learn a little more about the study rules or any of these other topics, definitely check out either our previous recordings, or you can always email us or your local representative for help. And thanks everyone for your time. Hopefully we'll be seeing you again at a future webinar.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was very helpful.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Goodbye.